Good evening, community. How you feeling tonight? Hey, what's going on? It's good to be with you guys. I was actually at Blast, our winter student conference up in the Wisconsin Dells last night, so I am feeling very well rested. No, I'm not. So maybe extra grace and patience for me tonight. But I wanted to start with a simple question. The question is this: what do you enjoy? What do you enjoy? And I want you to actually maybe finish this sentence and tell the people nearest to you. How would you finish that sentence? I enjoy blank. Why don't you go ahead and turn to someone near you and just share maybe a couple of answers. I enjoy what? Yeah, just let them know. I would love to know what's happening over here in this region. Let's find out. Okay, so what are some of the answers? Just shout it out. What are some of the things that this section over here enjoys? These are my people. Sleep, that's right. Sleep. Anyone else say sleep? Yeah. This is the right place to be. How about the center section? Something you enjoy. Just shout it out. Yodeling? Yodeling. We're going to go with yodeling in this section. This section is all about yodeling, this will be an exercise later in the service. I'm just kidding. This section over here, what's some things you guys enjoy? What, going out to eat? Excellent. Going out to eat. Anyone going out to eat? That's like a real favorite thing that you enjoy? Yeah. I mean, it's way better every time I don't have to cook. My guess, though, is some of you perhaps answer the question this way. I enjoy chocolate. Would anyone respond that way? Okay, so this, to me, this is the classic, right? Is there anything better than just like Hershey's melting in your mouth with a tall glass of milk? The answer is no. There is nothing better than that. But, however, since getting married, my understanding of the chocolate world has expanded significantly. It's incredible. I had no idea how much chocolate was available in the world. And my wife has introduced me to this little gem here. And this is the, anyone know what this is? Literally applause. That's just people are like worshiping. Yeah. This is the Ghirardelli dark and caramel with salt, but not just any kind of salt. Do you want to guess what kind of salt it is? Sea salt. Literally shouts. I don't know who's marketing sea salt right now, but they're crushing it. Sea salt is in everything. Now, maybe all this talk of chocolate is actually getting some of you hungry. Would anyone love some chocolate right now? Okay, I figured, I'm gonna pass out some chocolate because I think you guys deserved it. So I'm gonna pass out some chocolate to y'all. Who over here would like some chocolate? Anyone over here want some chocolate? There you go, you get a piece of chocolate. Back here with somebody raising a hand, there you go. That's got almonds in it, so hopefully you don't have allergies. Yeah, you got one, there you go. Anyone, truffles, any truffle lovers? There you go. You want some chocolate? There you go. She raised her hand first, I'm sorry. Last piece of chocolate, anyone want the Hershey bar? Way over here, I'm coming for you, here we go. There it is, your chocolate bar. Okay, so go ahead and open up that chocolate. Yeah, go ahead, open it up. Just smell it. Just let that scent waft over you. Go ahead and even taste it if you want. Go ahead and taste the chocolate. Don't eat all of it though, because you'll spoil your dinner. It's not a. What's wrong? What's going on with the? You're not gonna taste the chocolate? Okay, so it's delicious. Someone needs more sleep. Okay. Stay with me. I have a point for all this. I'm getting somewhere. You're mad at me for passing out pictures of chocolate when I told you it was real chocolate, right? Some of you are very upset with me right now. And I think this communicates a really important truth, is that in order to enjoy chocolate, you have to actually taste it, right? You have to actually experience it. Simply holding a picture of it or talking about it is not the same as actually experiencing it. So I want to ask that question again. I enjoy what? And I wonder, did any of us answer God? I enjoy God. Because I'll be honest, that wasn't even an option growing up for me. No one had ever talked to me even about the idea of enjoying God. At best, God was to be obeyed and feared. But did you know that God actually desires for us to enjoy him? And in the same way as we talk about chocolate, not just to simply know about him, but to experience him deeply. Now, my guess is when we talk about our posture towards God, there's probably a number of different responses in this room. Some of you might say, I love God, right? Like we know that that's the Sunday school answer, but we also know that you can love someone without enjoying them, right? Like anyone in here have kids? You connected the dots, not me. Like, it's easy to say, oh, I love God sort of in this nebulous, ethereal sense, but do you enjoy God? You might be someone who says, I like God. I like God. He's okay. He's cute. He's nice, right? He's kind of over there. I don't think much about him, but I like him. He's okay. He's B minus maybe. Maybe others of you think, I fear God. And not like in a biblical sense of like reverence or awe. It's like actual fear. Like to you, God is maybe just arms crossed in heaven, like an angry parent just like waiting for you to get your life together. Like just always upset, always ready to make you feel bad for whatever you've done or not done. Maybe some of you think, I just avoid God. Maybe in your mind, God's kind of like this cosmic killjoy, right? He's out just to squelch all my fun. And actually, if I were to pursue him, I'm afraid that he asks me to do things that I don't actually want to do. So I just sort of stay out of his way. I'm grateful maybe for heaven sometime down the road, but I don't really interact with him much. Which view of God do you take? Is it one of those? Is it something else? I think there are a lot of different ways that we think about God. But when Jesus came to earth, he blew apart all of those disruptive, distorted views. So as Sherry mentioned, we're in week 2 of a series we're calling Radical Life. And the whole point of the series is we want to dive into the life of Jesus, this rabbi, this Messiah that came and flipped everything on its ear and calls us to live in a radical kind of way. A way that many, when people heard his message, couldn't understand, refused to understand. Jesus came to show us what God is really like. So what does he do? How is God revealed in the life of Jesus? Well, I think one of the persons to turn to is a close friend of Jesus. And Jesus had a close friend named John. And John was a part of Jesus' inner circle. You had the 12 disciples, but then there was like this inner circle of 3. These 3 that Jesus had like special conversations with, really unique encounters. This was also the person that sat closest to Jesus at the Last Supper. That was a really important seat at that table. In fact, hanging on the cross, Jesus is speaking to John, asking John to then care for Jesus' mother after he's gone. So John is someone who is intimately connected to Jesus. So when it comes to how does actually Jesus reveal the nature and character of God, I think John provides some really important insight. Here's what he says in 1 John 4. He says, God is love. God is love. 3 simple words with profound implications. He's saying God isn't just loving. God isn't just good at love. God ontologically within his very nature and essence is love. I can sort of picture John just like shaking people. Like, can you believe it? Do you understand? God isn't just loving, he is himself love. And I wonder, maybe we need to be shaken by that truth tonight too. Maybe in all of our categories and all of our language and all of our ideas about God, we've forgotten, or maybe we never really realized that God himself is love. Let's read this verse in context here. It says, if anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in them and they in God. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in them. This is how love is made complete among us so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world, we are like Jesus. In this world, we're connected to Jesus. We identify with Jesus. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. We love because he first loved us. We love because he first loved us. I think maybe this is a word that a lot of us would do well to grapple with today. That if we begin with the posture and assumption that God, before anything else, is love, would that change the way that we live our lives, both with him and with the world? And I think this passage communicates two really important truths. The first is this: John says God's love fills us. It fills us. Like, is there anything better than being filled with love? Like, have you ever had a meal or a conversation with someone that just I don't know, they just get you. You know that friend or family member that when you're together, time just seems to stop and you're like, oh, you're so filled with love. I love that picture. The Apostle Paul kind of echoes this idea in Romans 5, and here's what he says. It says, God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, has been given to us. It's this idea that God doesn't just sprinkle a little bit of love on us once in a while or on Sundays or when we're with our church friends. The image here is like the emptying of a container. The kind of love that's just always being poured out over us, into us. Can you imagine what would change if we began to live in the constant awareness that we're always being filled by God's love? God, the creator of the universe, is filling us with his love. John also says God's love defines us. God's love defines us. He says, in this world, we're like Jesus. Now, some of you are probably sitting there thinking whoa, you don't know what I did last weekend. I ain't nothing like Jesus. What he's saying here is that if you are a new creation in Christ, you are identified with Christ. Your identity isn't found in your successes or your failures, your titles, your status, your paycheck, your degree, your house, your car, your accomplishments, your social circles. Your identity isn't achieved, it's received freely in Jesus. That's the scandal of the gospel. That regardless of who you are or where you came from, we're defined not by how good a person we can be, but by God's love. In this world, we're identified as Christ. How freeing would that be? It's not that we don't still try. It's not that we still don't put forth effort. But we don't work in order to achieve God's affection. We work from it. Knowing that that affection has freely been given to us, I think changes everything. We're constantly being filled by and defined by God's love. Our standing is the same as Jesus. In fact, I would put it this way, that no one has the right to define you except for the one who made you. No one has the right to define you except the one who made you, and he calls us beloved. This God says son, daughter, son, daughter, son, daughter. I have loved you with an immeasurable love, a love without brim or bottom, far greater than you could even wrap your brains around. That's the kind of love that God has for us. And I don't know about you, I have a really hard time keeping that at the front of my mind. There's so many voices always trying to remind me of how I'm not good enough, not smart enough, not strong enough. All of the things that I think the world often tries to whisper in our ear or shout to get our attention. And God says, listen, you don't need to pay attention to that noise. You're filled by and defined by my love. What would it look like in our lives if that belovedness really sank deep in our hearts? Honestly, I think that it would change everything. I think that it would change everything. Here's the radical truth that I think a lot of us need to hear today, and it's that God enjoys you. Did you know that? God delights in you. And God delights in you, not a better version of you. It's not like, come back to me when you have your life figured out, when you've dealt with some of these issues. Exactly as you are right now, God sings over you. He enjoys you. He delights in you. He loves you as you are, not as you ought to be, because none of us are as we ought to be. That's the point of grace. That's the point of mercy, of the gospel, that regardless of whatever baggage or junk or story you brought in here tonight, And God looks us in the eye and says, you're my beloved son or daughter. I enjoy you. I delight in you. Do we really know that? Not just know that, but have we experienced that? It's one thing, right, to talk about chocolate. It's another thing to experience it. I think that's true of our relationship with God. It's one thing to know the verses, to know the Sunday school answers. It's another thing entirely to just be hit by a tidal wave of grace and mercy and forgiveness and identity and love. When you do, that changes, I believe, everything. In his gospel, John records these words of Jesus. He says, I am the vine. This is Jesus speaking. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. Now the word remain there in some translations is the word abide. And these words can sort of feel kind of churchy, right? Remain, abide. What they actually mean is to just hang out, to just spend time with. Like, that's the invitation of this passage. So many of us, I believe, are doing so many things for God that we're failing to do things with God. We're doing things that on the surface look like churchy Christian things, right? And it's not that those things are bad, but I can't help but wonder how many of us God is looking at saying, hey, you're doing good work, but I would really love for you to first just kind of abide in me. Just remain in me. Find your identity and strength in me. And did you notice this? It says, as the Father's loved me, I've loved you. The same love that the Father has for the Son, he extends to us. That means it's not a second-class citizen kind of love. It's not a knockoff brand kind of love. The same love that the Father has for the Son, he looks at each of us and says, that's how I feel about you. I'm crazy about you. I'm crazy about you. Now that's hard for us to wrap our brains around a bit, right? I think a lot of us have a hard time believing that God enjoys us because if we're honest, we don't really enjoy ourselves, right? How could God love me? I don't even love myself. And I believe that when God says no one has the right to define you except the one who made you, that includes ourselves. And when those voices, when we want to convince ourselves that we'll never be good enough, smart enough, holy enough, pretty enough, successful enough, God says, even to those innermost thoughts, I am greater and wider and stronger than any of that. And I call you beloved. I call you son. I call you daughter. He says, remain in me. Just receive life from me like a fruit on the vine. Be filled and defined by this love. Why? Why should we do that? He goes on, verse 11. It says, I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be, what's the word? Complete. See, a lot of us have this idea that like the point of Jesus in the gospel is to like hunker down here 80 to 90 years and then we get sucked up to heaven eventually when we die. Like the point of Jesus is to go up instead of down, right? Harps instead of pitchforks. And what Jesus says over and over again is not that heaven isn't true, right? That's part of it. But over and over again, he says, I came so that you could have life right here and now. That you might not have not just a little bit of joy, but complete joy, abounding joy, overflowing joy. Could any of us use a little bit of that in our lives? Like not just this ever-passing joy that kind of comes and goes based on circumstances, but like real, like rooted joy. You know that impulse, like that desire for that is hardwired in us? And Jesus says, yeah, I'm the one that came to bring it. How do we get there? By abiding in him. By remaining in him. I live so much of my life thinking that joy will be found in me like working my fingers to the bone by being successful enough or having enough people like me or having this stage or platform or media, whatever it is, being big enough, successful enough, strong enough, right enough. And yet Jesus seems to be implying, no, the way the true abiding joy is to first just abide in me, to just enjoy me, to experience me, to rest in me. That's what celebration is all about. We talk a lot about the 3 C's here, right? Celebrate, connect, contribute. And celebrate is about delighting in God, abiding in him, enjoying him. Celebrate is about living in this perpetual enjoyment of God. It's not about fear. It's not about half-hearted devotion. God enjoys us, and he longs for us to enjoy him. So how do we do that? One of the things that we do is what we're doing right now is we gather together. The point of gathering isn't just to sing some songs and hear some words. There's significance to meeting together as a family. That as we do this, we're caught up, we're stirred. What stirs your affections for God? Part of what gathering does is it reminds us, oh yeah, there's a God far greater than myself, and I want to commit my life to that. It's why we read and study his word. It's why we get connected in small groups. It's why we serve. It's why we enjoy the beauty of creation. It's why we, in awe and wonder, look at the things around us, because God created us to enjoy him, to delight in him. And I think I've spent far too much of my life simply doing things for him and not enough time just spending with him. The practices of Celebrate, it's not about appeasing or impressing. They're pathways to enjoying God. See, I think a lot of us, in our relationship with God, we've really existed a whole lot more in a category of have-tos instead of get-tos. I guess I have to do that, right? I gotta kind of check that box. I really probably should. You know what I know to be true about things that we delight in? Typically, people don't have to twist their arm to do them. I love playing drums. I'm not very good, but I love doing it. No one ever has to coerce me into playing drums because I enjoy it. I get such great delight out of doing it. What if we began with delight? What if we began with enjoyment? God, teach my heart to just abide in you, to love you, to allow your love to change my heart. I think if we begin there, we'll be amazed at the fruit that'll be born in our lives. Last week, we introduced a new and improved 3C spiritual growth plan. And this is a really practical way that I think all of us can begin to take next steps toward actually growing in these areas. If you haven't yet, I can't encourage you enough. Just go to this website here, and it'll take just a couple of minutes. You can kind of assess, particularly with these 3 C's, sort of where your strengths, where your weaknesses, and then set up a plan to actually grow this next year. Some really practical resources and ideas for how do I actually do this then, right? How do I actually grow in Celebrate, in my enjoyment of God? And then at the end of the series, January 28th, everyone together, we're going to have a big commitment Sunday, because we believe that life is lived better together. It just is. And so together, we're going to commit, maybe recommit. God, I know that in a lot of ways, the ways of Jesus seem upside down and difficult, but I believe them to be the way of life, of wholeness, of shalom, of love. And we're going to commit together to following more closely this radical Jesus, the real Jesus. And I think it's going to be one of the most important Sundays of the year as we commit together, knowing that none of us will do it perfectly, but to look each other in the eye and remind each other along the way, you are not alone. You're not alone. We're in this together. But for now, let me just ask you this. What step could you take this coming year to help you grow in enjoying God? It's just like chocolate, right? You can't enjoy it without experiencing it. Makes me think of this movie. It's a few years old now. It's a movie called Chocolat, I think is how you pronounce it. Is that right? Someone early in the service was like, it's pronounced chocolat. I was like, I'm not doing that on stage. And then I just did, so. But in the movie, there's this really sweet, quaint little town, and this mother and daughter move to town, and they open up a chocolate shop. And the villagers lose their mind. Everyone loves this chocolate shop except for one guy, the mayor. For whatever crazy reason, this mayor hates chocolate, hates the chocolate shop. And the thing that's really interesting about his character is that he's super successful. He's wealthy, he's got a beautiful wife, he's the mayor, he's actually a really religious guy. He's always politely greeting people on Sundays. And there's this one scene, it's a weird scene, but he breaks into the chocolate shop with the plan to destroy all the chocolate. Here's a picture of him breaking into the chocolate shop. He's just just like dashing it to pieces, and he's stomping it all out just in this like fit of rage. And the weirdest part of the scene then, like this really strange close-up on just his lips, and you can see that just like the smallest piece of chocolate has just landed on his bottom lip here. And then he licks that chocolate off his lip. And like the look in his eyes changes. And everything shifts in this moment. And he just begins to ravenously start eating all of this chocolate. Here's where he ends up just a couple minutes later. Just eating all of it. He went in with the intent to destroy this chocolate, but he had never actually tasted chocolate. He'd never experienced it. And when he finally did, it changed everything for him. I'm not being hyperbolic. I think experiencing the love of God, the forgiveness of God, the mercy of God is the most transformative thing that could ever happen to us. How we answer that question about how we posture ourselves towards God might be the most important decision we make. What would it look like for us to say, I'm not gonna just be content talking about God or filling my head with cerebral information about God? What if it actually became like an actual relationship where you walked with God, knowing that he delights in us, enjoys us, pursues us, and offers forgiveness over and over and over again. Instead of just a picture or description of God, we can begin to experience God himself. I think this is part of what inspired the psalmist to write these words. He writes, taste and see that the Lord is good. As if to communicate to all of us, it's more than just a cognitive understanding. The invitation of this poet, this psalmist, is to not just talk about, not just study, as good as those things are, but to experience fully the love of God, to enjoy him, to abide in him, to remain in him. And friends, I think when we can do that, it will change our